All right, I'd like to cover Chapter 6 hands-on, or that is, I'd like to go through the chapter coding a bit. Now, remember that what I do here in class isn't exactly what the book has, and we don't go through it page by page. What I try to do is use the time that we have the most effectively we can. So I go through the pages, but yet at perhaps either a different rate or coding something a little bit different than what the page has, and we don't necessarily go through every single page in order. So just be aware of that and just kind of follow my lead instead of trying to work ahead, because we may not be doing that particular thing you're working ahead on. All right? All right, so what you'll find is you'll find the files that you'll need at the bottom of module number 6. Right? It's chapter 6 class.zip, used for in-class hands-on. Once you've done that, you've downloaded it, unzipped it, it should look something like this. A series of folders: kayak, lighthouse, opacity, trillium, and all of these have some files in it that we're going to be working on in the chapter. You can turn to page 175. That's the beginning of the chapter, but we're going to start on page 176, 177. And if you haven't opened up a browser yet, please do that now, and your code editor. So go ahead and open that up. So I'm going to do the same. And what I've done initially is to open up a file in both the code editor and in the browser. And that file is called index inside of the Trillium folder. So please find the Trillium folder and open up the index file within that folder. Trillium, yes. So within the Trillium folder, you should see an index file, and you can open that file up, and it should look what you see on the screen here. It should look something like that. Now, I've opened it up in Notepad++. That's what we have loaded on these workstations. And just a couple of reminders about Notepad++. One of the things that we can do is we can word wrap. So there is a button on the toolbar just underneath the window menu, and it's called word wrap. This way you don't have to scroll left and right. And then there's another one that I like using because you can see that on the screen that the code is very small. There's two buttons, a magnifying glass with a plus and a magnifying glass with a minus. I'm going to use the plus a couple times and kick this up a notch. All right, so it's easier for me to see it as well as hopefully for you, those of you that are in class, to see it as well in the classroom. Okay. So what I want you to do, just for now, is take a look at the web page, right? See what content you have there, and then take a look at the code and see, right, the connection between the code and the actual page itself. Right? So you'll see we have a embedded style. It's got a body selector, H1 rule, H2, paragraph rule. We have a nav rule. Then we have a class, company name. Then we have a footer, and that's all inside an embedded style. So remind me again, why are we working with embedded styles here in the classroom when I've always said we don't really want to use embedded styles? It's a very specific thing you might use an embedded style for. Your case study and your project is going to use an external style. So why are we using an embedded style here? Thank you. It's a little bit easier in the classroom, right, to get the point across of coding when we're only working with one file. So it's really only for classroom purposes. Okay, great. Thanks. All right, now I'm going to scroll down a little bit and look at the actual HTML portion, right? Should look and mimic, really, the page in the browser. So we have our heading, we have our navigation, right? And then we have all the other good stuff in there. Okay. Sound good? All right. Scroll back up. Now, on page 176, 177, these two pages talk about height and width. So the first thing we're going to work on is the width. So let's go to our body element. So let's go to our code, find our body element, and I'm going to add another declaration after the font, right, after the font family. And we're going to add something called width. All right, so the width of the actual body, and we're going to make that 80%. And of course, I'm going to use my semicolon, and that's all I'm going to write. So don't go work ahead, because there's actually two properties there. I only want to write the first one, and then I want to test it and see what it does. So I want the body to be 80%. So let's go ahead and save that. Go to your browser, refresh, and now what you should have noticed is that my page looks a little different, right? It looks like I'm down to 80% of content, 20% of nothing, right? Just blank space. So that H1 that went all the way across is no longer 100%, which is the default. Now, hold on a second. Watch as I resize my browser. As I resize, I continue to get only 80%. And as I continue to make it smaller, it really starts to distort the content that I have, because we really have no other, right, setting or property that says, wait, you're going too far. Don't go this small, right, because you're really destroying my layout. Okay. Now, if I maximize the window, yeah, it's still 80%. That's the idea, right? And that 20% seems a lot larger than before because it's a much larger window. Okay? All right, now the next thing I want you to do is we're going to code in another width. This one's a min width, right? A minimum width. In this case, we're going to set a pixel size. So 600 px. So 600 pixels wide is the minimum I want to go. So save that, flip-flop the browser, refresh. Did you see a change? You shouldn't have if your browser window is larger than 600 pixels, which most likely it is. Now watch as I resize my browser, make it a little bit smaller, little bit, oh, did you notice? It hit 600 pixels right there. Notice the H1, it just stops getting smaller. And I can get smaller, but now I have a scroll bar, right? So minimum width simply says don't get any smaller, right, than 600 pixels. I can change my browser size, but I can't change the body size because we indicated it 600 pixels. Sounds good? All right, fantastic. All right, let's move on to the height, okay? Number 2 on page 177. We're going to make some changes to the height of the H1, okay? Now, at this point, if we look at H1 and we go to our, let's see, I guess we go to our browser, you're going to see a graphic, right, in the background, perhaps. And I haven't looked at the code yet, but I'm guessing this is going to be in the background of either the header or H1, most likely H1. So now I'm going to go to my code, and I'm going to go down to the HTML and look at my H1. Yeah, it looks like that graphic is in the background because it's not inside the header or H1. So now I'm going to scroll up a little bit, find H1. Yep, and there it is. I have a graphic in the background. Okay. Now, this graphic is being cut off. It's much larger than the graphic you actually see. So the question is, well, how big is it, and how big should I perhaps make it? So I'm going to go back to my folder. I'm going to go inside the Trillium folder, and there's my graphic. And if I click on it in Windows just once, I am now going to see the dimensions at the bottom of that window. It's 134 wide by 86 tall. So now I know the size, and so maybe I might set the height, right, of H1 to be 86 pixels. So let's see how that works. So now I'm going to go down to H1. I'm going to add an additional line, right, after text indent, and I'm going to call it height. And then we're going to throw in 86 pixels because that's the height that we said the graphic is. Okay, go ahead and save that. Flip-flop to your browser. Refresh, and there is our height for our H1, right? Much larger. Okay. Now I'm going to resize this, right? And as I resize, we're still good, so no effect to that 600 minimum width. Now, what seems to be a little odd is that Trillium Media design, right? Their not logo, but their company name is at the top of H1. right? So it's at the top of that 86 pixels. So we're going to change that by using something called line height. It's the next property I want you to add to the code. So underneath the height, let's add line height. And the line height we're going to add as a percentage. So we're going to make that line height 250%. So 150% larger than it was originally. Go ahead and save that, flip-flop, refresh, right? And now that item looks a little bit better because it's now centered, right, in that space. Okay. So height and width, page 176, 177. How are we doing? Good? All right, let's rock and roll. Let's talk a little bit or do some exercises on the box model. Now, pages 178, 180, I'm sorry, 178, 179, 180, 181, 182, 183. Look at the box model, the margin, the padding, and the border. So what we're going to do is we're going to do all of those starting on page 184. So we're going to skip all the kind of textual stuff, and we're going to get to some good examples where we're going to look at margin and border and all these things. Okay? So 184 starts out with borders, which essentially is our rounded corners. So we're going to work on borders and rounded corners at the same time. So page 184, 185, these are our rounded corners. We're going to be using a different file. So please go to your code editor, and I want you to open up the file that's inside the folder called Lighthouse. So go to the folder called Lighthouse, and there's an index file there. Please open that file. Then go to your browser and do the same thing. Open the Lighthouse file. I believe that's on my desktop. It is Lighthouse, and there we go. So currently there is our Lighthouse Bistro file. Left aligned, right? It appears we have some gradients going on here, right? It appears. But this gradient, I believe, is a graphical gradient, right? It's not coded as being a gradient. Because if we look at our HTML and our CSS, you'll notice the body has a background image of background.jpg. And if I go to my folder, my Lighthouse folder, there it is. There's my background. Let's do a preview. Do we have a preview? Here we go, preview. So there's my background. Look at that. It goes from light to dark. Okay? So it is a file at this point. All right, so I'm going to minimize that. Now, I'm going to maximize this browser. What do you see? I just zoomed out using my browser. Control minus zooms out while Control plus zooms in, makes it a little bit larger, right? And then Control 0 gets you back at even. So what I've done is I've zoomed out so you can actually see, right, the next iteration of that image. Because remember, background images, what you learned in the last chapter, they repeat by default unless you set them not to repeat. So now our background image is actually repeating again. Yikes. So imagine if you had a lot of content, you'd be seeing this when you scroll down. Not very good. So I'm going to go back to 0 there, and we'll punch it up a bit, I guess. Make it easier to see, or just keep it at 0, whatever we want to do. All right, so I just wanted to illustrate that, and it's very, now we can really see that it's a graphic, and it's not using CSS to do our gradient, which we will learn how to do tonight. Okay. All right, so first thing I want to do is I want to make some changes to the heading. Right, so up here I want to make some changes to my H1, which is actually down here inside the header, right, lines 19, 20, and 21. So I'd like to add a H1 after the body. So give me a couple of lines after the body selector or rule, and let's put in H1 there. And the first line that I want you to write, we're going to actually write, we'll write the first line as the background image. And basically, I think I'm going to copy the declaration from the line up in the body. So this way I don't have to type as much. And then I'm going to make some changes, of course. I'm going to change that file from background to lighthouse.jpg. So lighthouse logo.jpg. All right, save the file. Let's flip-flop to the browser, refresh. Oh, must have something incorrect here. Hold on. Lighthouse logo. Thank you. Thank you. All right. Very good. Okay, so here we go. There's our logo, our graphic in the background. I'm going to maximize the browser. Notice how it's repeating on us, right? Again, by default, the background repeats. We have to tell it not to. So that's what we're going to do next. So let's go back to our code. Our next line is going to be, it's actually under number 2 on page 185. It's background dash repeat, no repeat. So I'm going to tab in a little bit here. Background dash repeat, no dash repeat. Okay, save that, flip-flop, refresh. I'll maximize the window. Now we can see that there is no repeating background. Yay. Okay, fantastic. All right, let's continue on. The next thing I'd like to code in is the height and the width. Okay, the height and the width. So I'm going to do the height first. So let's type in height. And our height is going to be 100 pixels. All right. So I'm going to save that, flip-flop, refresh, and now I can see it coming together a little bit better. I mean, we still got some issues, but we'll work those out. All right, next thing I want to set is the width of H1. So I'll throw in the width, and then we're going to use a 700 pixel, right, width. Well, why 700 pixels? Let me go back to my folder. Let me look at my Lighthouse logo file, and it appears that the Lighthouse logo file, oh, let me bring this up here, is 900, right? So the dimensions is 900 wide, but I only want to show 700 of it, right? So essentially, I don't have to show the whole graphic, okay? So we're going to go back to the code, and 700, let's save that, flip-flop to the browser, refresh, and now I'm cutting off whatever is extra because I really don't need it. It's simply the same color, right? And I only want that to be that wide. So far, so good? All right, let's keep on going. All right, the next thing I want to do is I want to change the size of the font inside of H1. So after our width, we're going to add font size. So font dash size. And then we're going to use 3EM, right? So basically, it's 3 times, right, larger than original. Its default size, which is 1EM. Okay? Great. So save that, flip-flop, and now, boom, we get a larger font. Now, why are we using EMs and not like pixels or points? Well, no. Let's think about accessibility. Let's think about responsive design. Let's think about resizing of the browser itself, right? So what we might do here is by using EMs, right, it allows us to resize that content, right? If we did pixels, it's pixels that size no matter what, right? By using EMs and percentages, we have the ability to enlarge and decrease things, right, based on the browser window and other things. right? So much better for accessibility, responsive design, things like that. Okay. Good. All right, so we made that text a little bit larger, but that created a problem. Well, it already had a problem because our graphic really is behind the text. And so now I want to push the text out enough that it doesn't cover the graphic that's in the background. So let's go back to our H1. We're going to add a new line. We're going to add in padding left. So only padding on the left. So padding dash left. We're going to do 150 pixels. We'll save that. We'll go to our browser, refresh, and see what we get. Ah, yeah. Anybody notice what happened? So not only did we get the padding, right, but we also pushed, right? We pushed that element and made it larger, 150 pixels larger than it was, because we added padding to it. So padding is the space between the border and the content, right? We said the content was how big? How wide did we make H1? 700 pixels. But because we added padding, we added 150 pixels more. So we now stretched it out larger. Did you notice how it expanded, right? So let me go ahead and comment that line out, save it, refresh, and look what happens, right? By adding padding, we're really adding space outside of the content box, which then stretches out the container, right? Yeah. So just keep that in mind, right? In case. So, oh, and by the way, here's our comment. Here's one way we can comment out lines in CSS. 2 forward slashes. Why would I want to do this? Yeah. Yeah, that's a second option we have. That's an asterisk forward slash, and then whenever you're done, you do the forward slash asterisk. And then so from the start to the end, that's all commented out. Okay. I think that's actually in the book, I believe. I think I don't know if it's in this chapter or one of the others. Okay. So why would I want to comment out anything in CSS? Yeah. Thank you. Number 1, right? Or number 2, depending on the second one here. Debugging. Something doesn't work. I just added it. I wonder if it's what I just added is the problem here. Or did I add 3 lines instead of the first one, check it, second one, check it, third one, check it. I added 3, and now I'm not sure which one's the problem. So I comment them out, and then I, right, remove the comment one at a time to see, right, where the problem is. Now, the other option we have is to what? Leave notes for people, right? We are probably working with a team, and you might want to tell them, don't you dare touch this, right? Because I worked on this for a long time. So don't change it, don't do anything. So exactly, right? Yeah, so not only don't touch this, but this affects, right, this, or that. Absolutely. So documentation and troubleshooting, right? Yeah, or debugging. Great, love it. Okay, so I'm going to get rid of those. I'm going to save it, refresh, and now we're going to move on. All right, the next thing we'd like to do is I'd like to add some padding to the top. So here's another option we have. So let's add some padding to the top. And padding and dash top. And we're adding, it looks like, 30 pixels of padding to the top. Right? And so now, this actually provides us with more graphic, right? Because, again, we're pushing the content, right, that little box in the middle of the box model, we're simply pushing it down more because we're putting more space between the content box and the border, right, which then extends it, right, by 30 pixels. So now we have a much larger graphic, which looks a little bit better. Okay. Finally, right, we get to the title of this little section, rounded corners. Let's give this sucker some rounded corners. So after our padding top, we're going to do border dash radius. Oops. ADS. There we go. And what do we do? 15 pixels, right? PX. Flip-flop. Refresh. And there you go. So we don't have to use the border property if we don't want a colored line as a border. Here, we're simply choosing it to, right? We're using the negative color behind it, right? That color, the lighter color, to become essentially the border for us, right? So we gave it 15 pixels of border radius, which then creates a nice little curve for us, right? What do you think? Useful? Think you might use this in the future? Yeah. When I do what? Because nothing happens. It's just you would think, right? Yeah. I know a lot of tools allow you to negative the radius, and it flips the. In this case, they haven't added that as part of the requirement. All right. Any questions on rounded corners? Can we move on? All right. I'll take that as a yes. Let's continue on to page 186, 187. Let's center this. All right. So let's center this page. So finally, we're going to work on centering the page itself. Right. So let's go to, let's see, page 187 at the bottom. Right, you're going to see a lot of code on page 186, 187. The one that we're going to work on is the one on page 187 at the bottom, right? So let's go to our code. We're going to go and create a new rule after the body, okay? And this case, we're going to create a ID, right? So we're going to create a ID that essentially allows us to center this content, okay? So £. We're going to call it container. And since there's only going to be one of these, that's all you need is one to center your content on the page. That's why it's an ID. Okay. All right, we're going to use margin auto, right? So it automatically figures out what the center is for us. And that goes along with the width. So let's throw in the width next. And the width is going to be 850 pixels. Why is it 850 pixels? Why do you think we're making this 850 pixels? Awesome. Our graphic was 700. We added 150 pixels of padding. 850. That's why we're making this 850. Okay. I want to see what this looks like. So go ahead and save it. Flip-flop, refresh. Let me make this thing a little bit wider. Anything happen? Why not? Are we missing something? The code looks right. What are we missing? Nope. Cha-ching. We haven't connected it to the HTML yet. So let's go to our HTML. Thank you very much. And now we have to scroll down and create, right, an element that we can apply the container to. So right after the body, opening body tag, give me a new line and put in a opening div tag. Then all the way at the bottom, before the closing body tag, I want you to put in a closing div tag. So we've added the element, but now we have to connect it to the rule. Go back to the first opening div. Give me a space, and now put in your ID for the container. Now we got a connection. So let's go ahead and save that. Flip-flop to your browser, refresh, and does your page center? If it does not, let me know. So now if I maximize it, it's still centered. I make it smaller, it's still centered. Right? What's really nice about this is that we only used 2 lines of code. We used margin, which we simply said, you know what, I'm not going to even worry about identifying whether it's the margin on the top, the margin on the bottom, or the margin on the left or right. I'm just going to say, you know what, hey, just figure it out for me on all sides, okay? And I'm going to make the width 850, so figure it out, okay? Cool. All right, let's add some more because we're not quite done. We want to add a background color, and we want to add a padding to the container. Yeah. So after the width, we're going to add background color, background dash color. Oop. There we go. And let's see, what is the color? Oh, white. So great. We're going to do a white. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Anybody know the shortcut for white? Instead of doing 6 Fs, can we do something else? Exactly, 3 Fs. But why can't we do 3 Fs? How is that possible? Not quite. So our hexadecimal values are broken up into what? 3, right? 2-character pieces. If those 2 characters in each of those 3 spots are exactly the same, that is, the first 2 are the same, the second 2 are the same, not the same to the first 2, but the second 2 are the same, and the third 2 are the same, we can remove one of them and collapse it down. So we have, in this case, 6 Fs. We can make it 3 Fs. We get rid of 1 F in each of the colors, and boom. Okay? But it only works if each of the 2 are the same. 6 don't have to be the same, but 2 have to be the same in each of the 3, right, colors. Great. So I'm going to do 3 Fs. And then what are we going to add? Padding. So I'm going to do the color right now just to see what that looks like. Oh, I like that. Right? So this gives us a little bit of different dimension to our page. Right? We give a background color to that div. And now I got to do, a little bit of padding, I think, is really what we're looking for here. So, so now let's add in padding. And we got the nice little shortcut there. So we're doing none at the, thank you, 20 where? Left and right, and 10 where? At the bottom. Fantastico. All right, let's do it. 0. Then we have 20, it looks like, right? 20 pixels. And then we have 10 pixels. Yippee-ki-yay. All right. Great. Save that. Flip-flop. Boom. All right. So it went outward. We got 20 pixels more on each side. Love it. And then we got the top to, I think, head up. Or no, I'm sorry, the bottom to give us a little bit more. Okay. I like it. Starting to look better. Any questions? All right, 186, 187 is where we talk about centering content on the page. All right. 188 and 189 talk about box shadow and text shadow. So 2 different types of shadows we can add, one to an element and one to text. All right, and that's kind of the idea there. All right, so let's look at adding one to, let's see, our container. So this white box is going to get a shadow. Okay, now to be a box shadow. So let's go to our code. Let's find our container rule. Give me a new line, and let's code in the code you see on page 189 under number 1. So let's write it in, and then we'll talk about it. Pixels, 3 pixels, 3 pixels. And then #1, 2, 3. Ah, yeah, look at that nice little shortcut again. That means we had 6 6s, which is, I think, gray. So, all right, so we got 4 values here. The first value is going to be the horizontal offset of the shadow. The second value is going to be the vertical offset of the shadow. The third value is going to be the radius. And then, of course, the fourth is going to be the color that you want that shadow. Okay? So let's go ahead and save that, flip-flop, refresh, and there you go. You now have a little shadow. Now I'm going to give you just a few moments to adjust those settings. So change it from 3, 3, and 3 to, how about 3, 3, and 10? Or 10, 10, 3, right? Or 50, 10, and, some other number, right? You really go way out so you can really see the effects. That's a really good way to do some testing. So if you're really not sure how a particular element or property works, you exaggerate the value and see, now I understand how, what that does. Did you have a question? Okay. All right. Any other questions? All right, so page 189. Let's see. Oh, so it looks like I used the text shadow color with the box shadow. So we can flip them around, no big deal. So now let's edit the text shadow of H1. So let's go to H1. Give me a new line after border radius, and we're going to add, it's under number 2, we're going to add text dash shadow. And what does it want here? It looks like 3 pixels, 3 pixels. And maybe we'll use 5 here since we use the 3, or at least I use the 3 for the container shadow. I'll use what I should have used there, here. And then we have the color, it looks like. Well, no shortcut this time. So now you have a little bit of shadow. Probably a smaller shadow would be best in this application, I believe. So I'm going to change it back to 3, 3, 3, and then I'm going to go and change my box shadow for the container to 5, 5, and see what that looks like. The colors I can keep the same. No big deal. Yeah, so I think a smaller shadow is best for the text. A little bit larger shadow, best for the element, right? The container. Okay. Any questions? All right, I want you to please add a text shadow to the H2s, please. A text shadow to H2. I'm just going to copy the one from H1, paste it in there, and then make some changes to the shadow itself. So it looks like we're doing a 1 pixel, 1 pixel vert, 1 pixel horizontal, 1 pixel vert, and a 0 radius, right? And then the color is also some sort of gray, CCC. So, oops, save that. Flip-flop. And so I believe it's there, but it's very, very minute. So just to make sure it does work, I'm going to exaggerate it. And yeah, now you can see that, I exaggerated 50 pixels. So it's there. It's just, really small and minute. All right, what do you think of box shadow and text shadow? You think you might find these properties useful? Okay, very good. Let's continue on. All right, we're going to skip to page 194. So we're skipping like some graphical stuff here. Clip in and origin and resizing and scale. You'll be using these a little bit later, okay, more effectively, especially with responsive design. So we're going to skip them for now. And we're going to go to page 194 and 195 where we talk about other additional CSS properties. that we're going to work with and just kind of get comfortable with in practice mode. Okay? So we're done with the Lighthouse file. So I want you to open up another file from your Chapter 6 class under Kayak. So go to the folder called Kayak, open up the index file, and please do the same in your browser. Open up the index from Kayak. We're going to get a little practice in. So what you see in your browser will become what you see on page 194. That graphical representation is what we're going to turn this current file into. Okay? So it's essentially a series of rules that will help us make the page look much, much better than it currently does. Okay? All right. So I'm going to look at my code a little bit, see what we got. I have an embedded style sheet, right? Body, header, H1, 2, and 3 all get the same font family. And then we have a footer and then our content, right? Not a lot of content. It's really not that much. Okay? Great. So first thing I want to do is I want to center this right page. So after the body selector, let's create a brand new rule. It is going to be an ID, so we know what we have to type in first. It's going to be called container. All right. At this point, shouldn't be new to you there, right? Okay. We're going to use margin left, margin right, and width of 80%. So they're going to go the 3 rule route, or 3 declaration route. So margin dash left, and that's going to equal auto, right? Let it figure it out on its own. Margin dash right, and it's going to figure it out on its own as well, right? Based on the width that we have, which, by the way, is 80%. All right, save that up, go to your browser, refresh. Well, this is probably because why? We're not connected, right? We created a container rule, but we don't have a container in the HTML. Very good. So let's add in, right after our body, we're going to add in an opening div. And just before our closing body, we're going to add in a closing div tag. And then now, go back to the one at the top, add in your ID attribute, and then your container value. Container, there we go. Save it, flip-flop, refresh. Now we're talking, right? Now center the page. Just a couple of lines, which is really nice. Okay. Not a lot of work to get that to be centered. All right, let's move on. Page 195, number 3. Okay, we're going to add in a couple of things to modify the container. Okay, so let's find that container, and we're going to add a background color. We're going to add a minimum width, a maximum width, and then a box shadow. So let's just play around with the width of this browser for a moment. Notice as I resize my browser, it really messes up my layout and my page. It looks like garbage. So now we're going to try to fix that. All right. So after the 80% width, we're going to add in a background color. Background dash color. Oops. I always use the E. Did it again. There we go. And what do we want? Oh, all F. So we can do a shortcut there. 1, 2, 3. That's nice. So I'll save that. Flip-flop. Get my little background. So that's nice. Then I want to add in min width. So minimum dash width. And the min width is going to be 650 pixels. And I'm going to check out that, see what that looks like. So as I resize my browser, it will not get any smaller than 650 pixels. There we go, right? So now it doesn't get smashed And then all we do is get a scroll bar, right? The smaller we make the browser. So that's cool. All right. And then we're going to add in a max width. So don't go any bigger, right? You can go smaller, up to 650, but don't go any bigger than 1280. So what do we got? Max dash width, 1280 pixels. Save that, flip flop, and now I'm going to maximize it. Okay. And so now let me see what we got here. This is, I want to find the ruler, miscellaneous. Where's my ruler? There we go, display ruler. So now I'm just going to display this. Look at that. The width, right? So my screen can't get any bigger than what it is. And at its biggest, right, the width of that, right, the body, the page is only 1,125. So I'm still 75 pixels short, or actually more than that, 150 pixels short, right, of the 1280. Your screens may have a bigger resolution, right, and perhaps maybe showing, right, up to 1280. So I just wanted to show you that, yeah, it will, right, go up to 1280. Now, what I used, which we'll talk about in another module, I'll introduce it to you, but since I used it now, I'll just kind of mention it. It's called the Web Developer Toolbar, and it gives you a lot of really good tools and features to use while you're developing and to test and look at and to, do some other things. So this one's really nice. This is a ruler. So I can actually identify the size of something if I wanted to know exactly what the size was of this rectangle, right? I could find out, right? That's the size of this rectangle. Or the size of this graphic, right? The width and height of, so far, this rectangle. So it's a really cool toolbar. It's something you can add into Firefox. So it's a Firefox plugin or add-in, okay, or extension. Okay. All right, let's continue on. All right, the next thing we're going to do is the box shadow. So if you haven't done that yet, let's do that. Box dash shadow. And we have, let's see, 3 pixels, 3 pixels, 3 pixels, I believe. And then the color 333. So save that, refresh, and now we got, right, a shadow. It definitely gives us a little bit different dimension to the page, right? It is definitely a lot nicer. All right, let's move on. We're going to do a little bit of editing to the header now. So let's find our way to our code, find the header rule, and let's add in, it looks like about 4 different declarations. We have a height, padding top, padding left, and a text shadow. So here we're going to go with height, 80 pixels. Padding, and only to the top at 5 pixels. I'll throw another one in here. Padding dash, what do we have? Left. And how many pixels? Oh, not even pixels, 2 EMs. Right? So twice the size of what the default padding would be. All right, and then the last thing I got is that text shadowing. So let me throw that in there. So text dash shadow. And what are we doing there? It looks like 111 and then white. Yeah, that'll show up actually kind of nice with that darker background graphic. So 1px, 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 and then our color, which is white. 1px, text shadow. Did I spell that wrong? Or maybe so small I can't see it. So let's go with, let's try 50 just to make sure. Yeah, it's there. It's just really hard to see at 1 pixel. So I'm going to give it a little bit more. Maybe like, let's try 2 pixels and 2 pixels. Ew. Yeah, I don't know if I like that. Looks blurry. Looks a little blurry. So, all right, let's just throw that in there as 1. I don't believe so. I think there are whole numbers, but we can give it a try, right? We can give it a try. So let's do, and it's very minimal. So that 1 pixel is so small that a half a pixel. Yeah. So I mean, we can try it, but I would have to validate it to see if it actually would work. But I don't think I'll be able to see a difference. Let's try that again, and I'll really pay attention this time. I think 0.5 does something different because it really gave it a lot. It actually gave it more than I would have thought a half a pixel would have given it. So I think it throws it off. So I believe it's whole numbers, as I indicated before. Yeah. Okay, let's move on. That was page 195, number 3. We did A and B. And now we're on to letter C. Let's modify the H1. So let's go to our code. After the 3 heading levels, right, that all get the same font family, we're now only going to focus on H1. So we're going to write in an H1 rule, right? And that H1 is going to get simply a margin bottom. We're going to kill the margin on the bottom. So save that, refresh. I don't know if I saw a lot there. So we're going to kill that whole rule. Actually, I can just do the. I'm sorry, I can do this a little bit easier. Yeah, I don't see much there. So margin bottom. So not a lot being seen there. Margin bottom. So for H1. Okay, let's continue on. We have, what else? Letter D. Ooh, okay, we're going to do something to the navigation. Very good. So we'll put in our nav. And it looks like we're going to be modifying the font weight, font size, and text align. So font dash weight. And we're going to do bold. Then we want font dash size, I believe. Is that what we're doing next? Yeah, font size. And we're going to give it a 1.5 EM. So here we can do half EMs. And then, let's see, we're going to do text dash align. And we'll probably center that stuff. There we go. Save it, refresh. And there's our navigation. Centering it across that 80%, right? Or whatever that, how much did we give it? Yeah, 80%. Okay. All right. That was letter D. Let's go to E. We're creating a descendant selector. So any anchor that appears inside of the nav is the only thing going to be affected by this rule that we're going to create. So after the nav rule, let's put in a descendant selector nav anchor. There we go. Let's put space here. There we go. And now let's see, what do they want us to do? Oh, okay, we're just getting rid of the underline. So text dash decoration and none. So we don't want it. So save it, refresh, and now the underline should disappear. Okay. How are we doing so far? How's the pace? Too fast, too slow, or is the porch just right? Okay, porch is just right. Very good. All right, let's continue on. What else we got? So we have F. We're going to modify the main element. So the main element that we have here. Yep, so we got main there, and so now let's add in. What do we got here? It looks like they want us to do some changes to the we're going to add a graphic in the background and then modify its size, its scale, right, and the ability to resize. So scale and resizing essentially is what we're doing. The width and the height, right? Width and the height of that background graphic. So this is under main. So let's put in main. And first thing we're going to do is put in a background graphic, background dash, what do we got here? Background dash image, right? And the image we're going to use is called Hero Back 2. Hero Back 2 dot what? JPG. Now I just want to confirm. So I'm going to go to my folder. I'm going to go to my kayak folder and confirm my Hero Back 2. There it is. So this is the graphic we're working with. Right? So I'm simply wanted to confirm, look at it. Yep, it's that's what the file name is. So I don't accidentally mess it up. So I'll minimize that. We got the right file name. I'm going to save this, refresh the browser, and there is our graphic. Yeah, a little tough to see there, especially with the text color. Right? All right, so we're going to make some modifications because it appears that based on the size of our element, based on the size of our main element, right, because it's only as big as the content in it, our background graphic is getting cut off. So let's throw in another declaration to make some changes to that size of that graphic. So we're going to do background dash size. There we go. And we're going to do 100% for the width, space 100% for the height. And this will provide us with, should be, right, the size being as big as possible, both high and tall. So let's save that, refresh, and now, right, you now see the whole thing inside that space. So now if I maximize, right, it's going to give me 100% high, 100% wide. So notice what I did. I maximized the window. That means the graphic is going to take up 100% of that, right, element. So just be aware of that. Okay. Excuse me. All right, let's continue on. All right, next thing we're going to do is, looks like we're modifying, we're going to modify the color of the text. Yeah, of course, because it looks terrible with black or dark color. And then we're going to change the padding a little bit. So let's add in our color and FFF. Much better. There we go. Now I can see the text. And then we're adding in some padding all the way around. So padding all the way around the element. So twice as much as the default text or default padding you would get. Right? Twice that amount. Okay. All the way around. Okay. So we'll put in display and then block. Oops. Because it doesn't recognize main, right, as the element. So we have to make sure that it knows what to do with main. So again, if you're using IE, right, it might repeat because IE has not decided to include the main element in part of their coding. So we have to have a fix. Now, what's really cool is that later on, when we start talking about responsive design, we include, right? We talk in a chapter. We talk about different techniques, and one technique to help older browsers, right, figure out what we want to do is we put this set of code, right, this rule at the top, similar to a rule that I mentioned before where we say, you know what, I don't want to worry about whether the element has a margin, a border, or a padding by default. I'm just going to zero everything out. Well, we do the same thing for all the newer CSS3 elements. We put in that it should be all considered block, right? So main, nav, footer, all of the header, all of these newer CSS3 elements that are block level, we use display block as a default, right at the top of the page. But we'll get to that. I think it's in chapter maybe 7 or 8, I believe, or something. So, yeah. And once we get to it, this will make more sense, right? It'll be like, oh, yeah, we're just kind of making sure that any other browser that doesn't recognize main, right, will know what to do with it, right? So, all right, very good. Let's see, and I think our last thing is the footer. So let's go to our code. And we're going to add in a couple of lines, I believe, to our footer. We're going to be adding, well, it looks like they already have the font style in there. Font size, text align, and then it looks like we're adding padding only. So just padding. And 0.5. EMs. Yeah, we're just making that a little bit bigger. Okay. So now hopefully what your page looks like in your browser now should look like what's on page 194, right? That graphical representation of what we should have accomplished. Any questions? Yeah, Michael. Okay. So we have to look at the code that you put in for when we last had it actually working. So do you know which rule that was? Was it like letter C, D, E, or F? Do we know about when? So we know for sure that it was working for what? The A, I believe, right? Did we also get it working for the header? This part up here. The heading there where it says kayakdoorcounty.net. Does it look like that? Okay. Then does the navigation look something like this? No. Okay, so maybe somewhere around letter D is where we need to look. All right, any questions with pages 194, 195? All right, let's rock and roll. All right, so the next couple things we're going to look at is opacity, how we can use RGBA, how we can use HSLA, right, for this transparency and alpha. And then the last thing is the gradient. So those are the 4 things we're going to look at. So we're going to use a new file. So let's go to your coder, right? Go to the folder for Chapter 6 class, and then go to the opacity folder. We're going to open up a file in that. Okay. You should have 2 files, a fall graphic and a index file. Please open up index in the editor, please. And then open up that same file in your browser, please. It should be blank, yes. We're going to build this out. Okay. Let's change the title of this page. We're on page 196, 197. The title should be something like Fall Nature Hikes. And now take your cursor down to the body of that file, in between the body tags. And we're going to put in a div element. So please put in your opening div tag and then your closing div tag. Now, within the div, tab in. Actually, I'll do the tabbing of the div as well. There we go, so a little bit easier to see. And now inside the div, we're going to put in a H1, please. So a heading level 1, a opening and closing H1. All right, the text that I want to be inside of H1 is going to be the same thing as our title. So you can copy and paste Fall Nature Hike or hikes and stick it inside the H1. And now save that. Go to your browser, refresh, and now you should see, right, that text. We're on our way. There's nothing left we need to do for our HTML. Now, after the meta element in the head, give me a few lines, and then let's put in our style element. Again, we're only doing this for class purposes, right? So we only have to work with one file. All right, page 197, which is under number 3. So it's on page 196, goes 1, 2, 3, and 3 slides over to 197. We're going to create our content ID. So use your symbol for an ID, which is the hashtag content. And now let's start building out the content, which is going to have a background image, no repeat, margin auto, width, height, and padding. I'm going to do one of these, each of these individually, one at a time, so I can see how it actually builds the file. So background dash image, URL, open close parentheses, no space between the L and the open paren, fall.jpg, and then our semicolon, and let's see. Oh, I still need to do a little bit of editing of our HTML. We got to put in our content ID. Okay? So let's put in the content ID inside the div, the opening div. Okay. So flip-flop, once you, right, put in the at least one declaration of the content ID, put in the ID attribute and the content value, and then refresh your browser, and this is essentially what I get, right? I get that background graphic with the text, which you can hardly see at this point. No problem. We're going to make some changes to that. And it's repeating, by the way. That graphic is repeating. All right, we're going to stop that graphic from repeating, so we're going to do background repeat. Repeat. No dash repeat. So now it only appears one time. That's great. And then we're going to add in our margin auto. So let it figure it out. And that goes along with the width. So you need that for it to work. And the width is going to be 640 pixels, which is probably the size of the graphic, is what I'm guessing. Okay. The width of that graphic. All right, and then we need a height. All right, we need the height of 10 pixels. Height of the content. Oh, that's pretty small. That's not right. Hold on. What did I? Oh, sorry. I was reading the wrong one. It should be 480. No wonder. I'm like, man, that doesn't look right. Ah, that's better. Okay, very good. All right, and then our last, let's see, property or declaration here is padding top for the content. So padding dash top and 20 pixels is what we're doing. Save. Okay, so we're just putting 20 pixels on it. So it appears it went up, so it actually had more, right? And we're just giving it 20. Okay, let's keep on going. The next thing I want to do is modify the H1. This is where we're going to start to use that opacity, right? By changing the color of H1 a bit. So let's go ahead and code our H1 rule. The first declaration or property is background dash color. And looks like we're using white. There we go. So now we got this strip going across the top for our background. And then I'd like to make it a little bit more opaque. So we're going to use opacity or opacity. And we're going to do our 0.6, so like 60%, right? And we'll see what we get. So we can start seeing through it. Right? And then the rest of them are just, size, padding, and a little bit of margin. So little extra bonuses here. So font dash size, right? Because we're really working for the opacity, the transparency is what we're really working at here. And let's see, 10 pixels. Was that? No, I'm sorry. 4 again. Wow, 4 times the size. Holy guacamole. And then padding, just padding all the way around. It looks like 10 pixels, and then margin, but just to the left. And we're doing 40 pixels of it to the left. Okay. And so that should look something similar to page 196, the graphic on page 196. Change the essentially the number. So from 6, make it 2, make it 8, right? And just kind of see what the difference is. Now, IE might have an issue with this. I don't think they really like opacity. So for IE, there is another property to be used. It's on page 197 at the bottom under number 6. It's filter. So you have to use the filter property and then alpha with opacity inside. So yeah, it's really convoluted. But to have it work on IE, right, in 8 older version, you may use this in addition. If it doesn't recognize it, it doesn't recognize it. It doesn't hurt it. Right? It just ignores it if it doesn't recognize a property. So it's okay to have it in there, just in case. All right, that's the opacity property 196.197. Let's take a look at how we can color using RGBA and make it transparent. So 198, 199. Go to page 199 under number 2. You're going to see some code there. Okay. What I want to do is I want to comment out opacity. So comment that out for me. Underneath background, actually we'll comment out background color as well. And what we'll do is we'll put in a new line. Sorry. And we'll throw in color here. So for text color. Okay. For text color. So the text color is going to be white. So let's save that and see what that looks like. Right, so all we're doing is making the font color white right now. And now we're going to add in that line. So in case the RGBA doesn't work, we have a fallback, right? It'll just be solid white and not transparent. So we use color, colon, and then RGBA, right? That's what we're trying to get at, is the A part for the alpha, the transparency. So 255 is the highest, right, for a red. Separate that with a comma and 255, which is the highest for a green. and then 255, which is the highest, right, value for blue. And then we're going to go with like an 80%, right, here. So we'll do that. Very close to 1. And we'll refresh. Okay. Now it is transparent. So again, if you want, try to change the numbers. From 8, do a 6, then do a 4, then do a 2, and see, right, what happens. Any questions? Okay. Now, another option you have, page 200 and 201, using HSLA. So hue, saturation, lightness, and then the alpha, right, the transparency of the color you want. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to comment those two out. Right. And then add in what they want us for this example. All right, page 201 on under number 2, there's some code there. Again, all we're going to change here is the color and then the other color property. So really, I think we're pretty good. I can uncomment out the first 2 lines and simply change the color if that's what we want. So this should be, oh, hey, we got something different finally. Notice that the color, text color is FFCCCC. So what's the shortcut? FCC. Very good. And now we're going to replace what used to be RGBA to HSLA. There we go. And now those numbers are going to be a little bit different, right? So here they want 60, which is a value, right, from 0 to 360, because it's like a circle, right? So they only want 60 there. The next value is going to be a percentage, right, of that color. And then the next value is also going to be a percentage, right? And then the last one is the actual transparency, which I believe it's the same. It's 8. All right, so this is like a yellow, it looks like, or a gold, right? Gold yellow. So again, just another option. Another way to get to a transparency. The first option was using color and opacity as the 2 different properties. This one is simply using one property for both the color and the transparency. But again, this is CSS3. I would assume, most browsers know this, but it's your users that you have to worry about. What are they going to have, right? What browser are they going to be using? An old IE, an old, Firefox? I don't know. Safari, maybe? All right, any questions? How are we doing? Doing okay? We got one last thing to go. It's 9 o'clock, but we're making a really good time. We got one last thing to talk about. That is gradients. Page 202 and 203, the gradient. So we no longer use a graphic, and now we're going to use essential code to do what we want. All right, this time we're going to go back to our Lighthouse file. So go to your code editor and find the Lighthouse file. I think it's the second file we opened, the Lighthouse Bistro file. Okay, what we're going to do is we're going to replace the background graphic, right, with code, CSS code, to give us a gradient. So let's bring up that file in our browser again, just so we know what it looks like. So the background, the body, has a graphic file, and we can do this. So if I minimize this, right, notice look at, you can see it restarting. You can tell, right? So we're going to fix that. So we're going to comment out the background image for the body. So just comment that out, and then we're going to code in the new one. Which is on page 203 under number 1. we always want to give a background color as a fallback. That's the idea. So if the browser doesn't recognize that gradient, right, piece that we're adding, at least it has a solid color to fall back on. And so that color is going to be, wow, DA70D6. Okay, that's the color that it'll fall back to. Now we're going to do another one, background dash image. So another background, but this time it's image. We're going to use linear gradient, linear dash gradient. And then in parentheses, right, no space between the T and the opening parentheses, we're going to type in to bottom. So it tells us that the first color should start at the top, the second color should then be at the bottom. So that's going to be the gradient, the two different colors. All right, we separate those with a comma. So the first color is going to be FFF for white at the top, and the second one's going to be whatever this other color is, which is the exact same color of the background in case it doesn't work. Excuse me. Okay. Now, don't put in that last line, the background repeat. Leave it out for now. So go ahead and save that. Okay. Actually, what we should probably do is make sure that it doesn't have a background, right? That what we did by commenting out the background image initially actually worked. So just bear with me for a moment. I'm going to comment out what I just did. You can sit tight just for a second. Refresh. No background, right? Now I put back the color. There's my color. And now I'm going to put in the gradient. Right? Without the repeat. What do you see without the repeat? It only displays up to the page. So if the page, the content, doesn't go down past the fold, it's going to repeat. Right? That's why we have that last line in there, which we're going to put in now. So add in the repeat line. So background dash repeat, no dash repeat. So now it stretches it from the top of the browser to the bottom of the browser. Watch as I minimize my screen. Look at that. So as you can see, right, there's this, you don't see a break where you get the new color, right? Or I said the new repeating gradient. Okay. That was page 202 and 203. What do you think? That's good. I can sense the excitement. There's a lot.